The neon sign of Sonny's Diner flickered against the humid Miami night, its pink and blue glow casting jagged reflections on the rain-slicked sidewalk. It was 2:13 a.m., and the city's pulse had slowed to a lazy thrum, the kind of quiet that only came after the bars closed, but before the early morning delivery trucks rumbled through. Inside the diner smelled of burnt coffee, fried onions, and something faintly like bleach, the kind of scent that clung to the cracked red vinyl booths and the faded checkerboard floor. Lily Harper chuttered. 28. Sat at her usual spot by the counter, her fingers tracing the rim of a chipped ceramic mug, the coffee inside long gone cold. She'd been coming here for months, ever since her breakup with Tom left her small Coconut Grove apartment feeling too big, too empty. The library where she worked closed at 9 p.m., and the idea of going home to silence, or worse, the hum of her own thoughts, was unbearable. Sonny's wasn't much, but it was alive, a patchwork of late-night stragglers who made the place feel less like a void. There was Carla, the retired flamenco dancer who always carried a dog-eared romance novel, and Eddie the taxi driver who swore he'd seen ghosts in the Everglades. Tonight, though, something felt off, like the air itself was holding its breath. Lily's skin prickled as she glanced around her hazel eyes, catching on the usual faces, all of them avoiding the corner booth, farthest from the door. There, tucked against the wall, sat a boy, maybe 9 years old, his small frame swallowed by an oversized navy hoodie that looked too expensive for a place like this. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his sneakers, pristine white high-tops, dangled above the floor as he sat cross-legged on the booth. His hands moved in quick, desperate arcs, forming shapes Lily recognized instantly: American Sign Language. She'd learned it years ago for her cousin Ben, who was born deaf and had spent his childhood teaching her how to talk with her hands. Even after Ben moved to Seattle for college, Lily kept up with it, practicing alone in her apartment, a promise to herself that she'd never let his language fade. The boy's hands were frantic, signing please and help over and over, his dark eyes darting from person to person. Carla Eddie, the cook, flipping burgers at the grill, but no one looked at him. Their faces turned away, some with a flicker of discomfort, others with something closer to fear. Lily's stomach twisted. Why was everyone ignoring him? He wasn't just some kid. His clothes screamed money, the kind of money that didn't belong in a dive like Sonny's. His hoodie probably cost more than her weekly paycheck, and those sneakers, she'd seen them in department store windows, priced like a car payment. But it wasn't the clothes that held her attention, it was the look in his eyes, a raw, aching loneliness that no child should carry. The waitress, Dolores, a woman with a perm as unyielding as her attitude, approached the boys' table with a stiffness Lily had never seen before. Dolores was usually all bark, tossing one-liners at drunks and regulars alike. But now her hands shook as she refilled a water glass, her eyes fixed anywhere but on the boy. His hands moved faster, signing food and hungry, his small face scrunching in frustration as Dolores backed away, muttering something under her breath and shaking her head. Lily's grip tightened on her mug. She'd seen enough. Setting it down with a soft clink, she slid off her stool, her sneakers squeaking against the floor as she crossed the diner. Conversations hushed as she passed forks, pausing mid-air, eyes following her with a mix of curiosity and something heavier, like they knew something she didn't. The boy looked up as she approached, his eyes widening, a spark of surprise cutting through the sadness. Lily slid into the booth across from him, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Hi," she said softly, then raised her hands. "What's your name?" The boy's face transformed like someone had flipped a switch inside him. His eyes lit up bright and alive, and a smile broke across his face so wide it made Lily's chest ache. His hands flew into motion, signing so fast she had to laugh and gesture for him to slow down. "My name is Timmy." He signed, his fingers trembling with excitement. "You can understand me." Lily nodded, her throat tightening. "I can understand you perfectly," she signed back. "Are you okay? Where's your family?" Timmy's smile faltered, his hands hesitating before he signed, "My dad's coming. He's always busy. People don't talk to me. They're scared." Lily frowned, her mind racing, scared of a 9-year-old. She glanced around the diner again, noticing how Carla had buried her face in her book, how Eddie was suddenly fascinated by his empty plate. The air felt thicker now, charged with an undercurrent she couldn't quite name. Before Timmy could sign more, the diner's front door slammed open, the bell above it, jangling wildly before falling silent. The room froze. 6 men in dark suits poured in, their movements sharp and coordinated, hands resting near their waists as if ready to draw weapons. Lily's breath caught her body tensing as the other customers shrank back, some sliding under tables, others staring at their hands like they could disappear if they tried hard enough. But it was the 7th man who made her heart stop. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe in his late 30s, with jet black hair swept back and eyes the color of a stormy sea. His tailored charcoal suit hugged his frame, and every step he took seemed to command the room, the air bending around him like he was a force of nature. This wasn't just wealth or confidence, this was power, raw and undeniable, the kind that made people flinch without him saying a word. His gaze swept the diner, cold and precise, until it landed on Timmy. His expression shifted, softening just enough to reveal something human beneath the steel. Relief, maybe, or fear. He moved toward the corner booth, his polished shoes clicking against the floor like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Lily's instincts screamed at her to run, but Timmy's small hand reached across the table, grabbing hers with a trust that pinned her in place. She couldn't leave him, not now, not when he'd just found someone who saw him. The man stopped beside their booth and knelt down, his massive frame somehow gentle as he touched Timmy's shoulder. "There you are, kid," he said, his voice low, with a faint New York accent that made it sound like silk over gravel. "You had me worried." Timmy's hands moved excitedly, signing something to the man who, to Lily's shock, understood him perfectly. Then Timmy pointed at her, his face glowing as he signed, "She talks to me. She knows my language." The man's eyes snapped to Lily, and the temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. Those stormy eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel like she was under a microscope, every flaw and fear laid bare. "You," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying across the silent diner. "Who are you, and how do you know his language?" Lily's mouth went dry. Every fiber of her being told her to lie, to back away, to get out of this diner and never come back. But Timmy's hand was still in hers, warm and trusting, and she couldn't betray that. "I'm Lily Harper," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I work at the public library downtown. I learned sign language for my cousin Ben. He's deaf." The man's eyes didn't leave her face, and she felt like a deer caught in a hunter's sights. He leaned in slightly, and she caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something sharper, maybe gunpowder. "Lily Harper," he repeated, testing her name like it was a puzzle piece he was trying to fit into place. Then he smiled, and it was more terrifying than any glare. "I'm Victor Hayes, and you, Miss Harper, have just made a very interesting impression." The silence that followed was suffocating. Lily could hear her own heartbeat, loud and unsteady, as Victor's gaze held hers. Behind him, his men had spread out, positioning themselves at every exit, their presence a silent promise that no one was leaving until he said so. Timmy tugged on Victor's sleeve, signing something that made his father's expression soften again, but only for a moment. "Everyone out," Victor said, still looking at Lily. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The effect was instant. Carla dropped her book, Eddie nearly knocked over his chair, and Dolores let out a yelp as she scrambled for the kitchen. Within seconds, the diner was empty, except for Lily, Timmy, Victor, and his 6 men who stood like statues around the room. Victor slid into the booth beside Timmy, his movements smooth and deliberate, like a panther settling in for a hunt. The boy nestled against his father's side, but his eyes stayed on Lily, bright with hope. "Let's talk," Victor said, his voice calm, but laced with something dangerous. "Properly." Lily's hands trembled as she set them on the table, the formica cool against her palms. "I told you, I'm Lily Harper. I work at the library. I learned sign language because my cousin Ben was born deaf. I've been signing since I was a kid." Her voice wavered, but she forced herself to meet Victor's eyes. "I just saw Timmy trying to talk and no one was listening. I couldn't just sit there." Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that made her think he wasn't used to people being honest with him. "Timmy says you're the first person who's talked to him like he's real," he said, his voice carrying a weight Lily didn't fully understand. "Do you know how rare that is?" She glanced at Timmy, who was watching her with that same hopeful glow. "People can be cruel," she said simply. "Ignoring someone doesn't make them less human." Victor leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "No," he agreed, "but being my son makes him untouchable. And that's a problem for some people." The words landed like a stone in Lily's stomach. She'd heard stories about Miami's underbelly drug lords, smugglers, men who ruled the city from shadows, but she'd never been this close to it. Victor Hayes wasn't just rich or powerful. He was something else entirely, something that made grown men flinch and waitresses run. "You're involved in something dangerous," she said, her voice barely audible. Victor's smile was sharp, like the edge of a knife. "You could say that." He gestured to one of his men. "Marcus, bring the car around. We're leaving." Lily's heart lurched. "Wait, I should go home. I have work tomorrow." "No," Victor cut her off, his tone final. "You're coming with us." Lily's legs moved before her brain caught up, sliding out of the booth, but she froze when she saw his men shift, blocking every exit, with a casual precision that screamed danger. "You can't just take me," she said, her voice shaking. Victor stood towering over her, and for the first time, she noticed the faint scar running along his jaw, barely visible under the diner's fluorescent lights. "I'm not taking you," he said, his voice softening just enough to make her pause. "I'm making you an offer." Lily's pulse raced. What kind of offer? Victor looked at Timmy, who was watching them with wide, worried eyes. "My son hasn't had a real conversation with anyone but me in his entire life," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "He trusts no one. Not my men, not his tutors, not anyone. Until tonight." His eyes locked on hers, and Lily felt the weight of his words like a physical force. "He trusts you, Lily Harper. And what my son needs, I make sure he gets." Lily opened her mouth to protest, but Timmy's small hand found hers again, squeezing gently. He signed, "Please don't go." Her heart broke. She looked from Timmy to Victor, then back to the boy, whose eyes were pleading in a way that made her want to cry. "Okay," she whispered, more to Timmy than to Victor. "I'll come." Victor nodded, as if he'd known her answer all along. He stood, taking Timmy's hand, and gestured for Lily to follow. As they walked toward the door, the men in suits falling into step around them, Lily caught Timmy signing, "Thank you," over and over, his face lit with a joy she hadn't seen in anyone in a long time. The black SUV waiting outside gleamed under the streetlights, its tinted windows hiding whatever lay ahead. As Lily climbed in the humid Miami air, Clinging to her skin, she realized she was stepping into a world she didn't understand. A world of wealth, danger, and a little boy who needed her more than she could have ever imagined. The drive to Star Island was quiet. The only sounds the hum of the engine and Timmy's soft breathing as he leaned against his father. Lily sat in the back, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, trying to process what she'd just agreed to. The SUV passed through wrought iron gates that opened silently, revealing a mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie, limestone walls, towering palms, and windows that glinted like eyes in the moonlight. Security cameras tracked their every move, and men in dark suits patrolled the grounds, their movements sharp and practiced. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. As the car stopped, Victor turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to my world, Miss Harper," he said, his voice low. "Let's hope you're ready for it." The wrought iron gates of the Hayes estate closed behind the SUV with a soft clang, sealing Lily Harper into a world that felt as foreign as another planet. Star Island, Miami's enclave of wealth and secrecy, gleamed under the pale moonlight, its manicured lawns and towering palms, a stark contrast to the gritty neon of Sonny's diner. The mansion loomed before her, 3 stories of limestone and glass, its sharp angles softened by bougainvillea vines that clung to the walls like desperate lovers. Security cameras swiveled silently, tracking their arrival, and men in dark suits moved through the shadows with the precision of soldiers, their eyes scanning for threats Lily couldn't begin to imagine. She clutched her worn canvas tote bag, the only thing tying her to her old life. As she stepped out of the car, her sneakers sinking into the gravel drive. Timmy, still holding his father's hand, glanced back at her, his small face bright with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Victor Hayes led the way, his tailored suit moving with him like a second skin, every step radiating control. Lily's heart pounded, her mind racing with questions she didn't dare ask. What had she gotten herself into? And why, despite every instinct screaming at her to run, did she feel like she couldn't abandon the boy who'd looked at her like she'd given him the world? Inside the mansion's foyer was a cathedral of wealth, marble floors polished to a mirror, shine, a chandelier dripping with crystals that scattered light like diamonds, and oil paintings of stern-faced men who all bore a faint resemblance to Victor. The air was cool, almost sterile, scented with something expensive and floral, but the grandeur felt hollow, like a stage set waiting for actors who never arrived. A woman in her 50s, dressed in a crisp black uniform, appeared at the foot of a grand staircase. Her gray hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her pale blue eyes swept over Lily with a mix of curiosity and disapproval. "Mr. Hayes?" she said, her voice clipped with a faint southern drawl. "The guest room in the east wing is ready." Victor nodded, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Rose. This is Lily Harper. She'll be staying with us." Rose's gaze lingered on Lily, her lips tightening as if she'd tasted something sour. "Very well, sir," she said, then turned to Lily. "Follow me, Miss Harper." Timmy tugged on Victor's sleeve, signing rapidly, his hands a blur of excitement. Victor's eyes softened as he watched his son. Then he signed back. "Go with Rose. I'll see you in the morning." Timmy hesitated, glancing at Lily, then signed, "Will she stay?" Victor's gaze flicked to her, and for a moment, Lily thought she saw something like uncertainty in his stormy eyes. "She'll stay," he signed, and Lily felt the weight of his words settle over her like a chain. Rose led her through a maze of hallways, each one lined with more cameras and silent, watchful men. The walls were adorned with art, modern abstracts in sharp reds and blues, a contrast to the old money portraits in the foyer. But the house felt lifeless, as if it were holding its breath. "Master Timmy doesn't usually bring strangers home," Rose said, her tone neutral, but laced with warning as they climbed a spiral staircase to the second floor. Lily's steps faltered. "You mean—" Mr. Hayes Rose's eyes narrowed just for a second. "No, miss. I mean Master Timmy. He's particular. Doesn't take to most people. The staff find him." She paused, searching for the word. Challenging. Lily stopped walking, her hands tightening around her bag. Challenging how Rose's face closed off her expression, as unyielding as the marble beneath their feet. "Nothing for you to worry about, miss. Here's your room." She opened a heavy oak door revealing a bedroom that was larger than Lily's entire apartment. The walls were painted a soft ivory, the furniture sleek and modern, with a four-poster bed draped in white linens that looked softer than anything she'd ever touched. A floor-to-ceiling window offered a view of the estate's grounds, where floodlights illuminated palm trees and a pool that shimmered like liquid sapphire. It was beautiful, but it felt like a cage. Rose lingered in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly. "How long has Timmy been like this?" Lily asked, setting her bag on the bed. Surrounded by people who avoid him, Rose's knuckles whitened as she gripped the doorframe. "Master Timmy is Mr. Hayes's heir, miss. Everything he touches is complicated. We do our jobs, we keep him safe. But getting close—" She shook her head, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That's not safe for anyone." Before Lily could respond, Rose was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Lily sank onto the bed, her mind spinning. She'd walked into something far bigger than she'd realized, something that made her small life, her library job, her thrift store clothes, her lonely nights feel like a distant memory. Through the window she could see guards patrolling the grounds, their silhouettes sharp against the floodlights. What kind of life was this for a child? The next morning, Lily woke to a soft knock on her door. She'd barely slept the unfamiliar luxury of the bed, doing little to quiet her racing thoughts. When she opened the door, Timmy stood there dressed in a crisp polo shirt and khakis, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His dark eyes lit up when he saw her, and he signed, "Good morning, are you ready to play?" Lily couldn't help but smile, her nerves easing slightly. "Good morning, Timmy." "Play what?" His hands moved eagerly. "Stories. You said you tell stories at the library. Can you teach me?" Lily's heart swelled. She'd spent years running story time at the library, weaving tales of dragons and pirates for kids who hung on her every word. But this felt different, more personal. Sure, she signed. "Let's make a story together." Rose appeared to escort them to the mansion's library, a vast room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of leather and old paper. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden patches on a Persian rug that probably cost more than Lily's car. Timmy settled at a mahogany table, his small hands already signing ideas for their story, a brave turtle who sailed the ocean to find a lost island. Lily joined in, guiding him through creating characters and plot twists, teaching him new signs for words like adventure and courage. His laughter, silent but radiant, filled the room, and for the first time since stepping into this strange world, Lily felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. But as they worked, she noticed Rose lingering near the door, her eyes darting nervously between Timmy and the hallway. The other staff maids, guards, a cook, who brought them snacks, moved around Timmy like he was a ghost. Their gazes sliding away, their steps quickening as they passed. Lily's chest tightened. How could a 9-year-old inspire so much fear? That afternoon, while Timmy napped in a cushioned window seat, Lily wandered the mansion, her curiosity getting the better of her. The hallways were a labyrinth, each turn revealing more opulence, marble statues, gold-framed mirrors, a dining room that could seat 30. But the house felt empty, its silence broken only by the occasional murmur of voices or the click of a guard's boots. She was passing a half-open door when she heard Victor's voice, low and sharp, like a blade cutting through silk. "Morales is getting bolder," he said. "He's been sniffing around the docks, asking about routes, schedules. And Timmy." Lily froze, her back pressed against the wall, her breath shallow. Another voice, gruff and nervous, responded. "Boss Diego Morales isn't just some street punk. He's got men resources. Word is, he's planning something big, something to hit you where it hurts." There was a long pause, and when Victor spoke again, his voice was ice. "Let him try. Anyone who touches my son answers to me, P." Lily's blood ran cold. She didn't know who Diego Morales was, but the name carried weight, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. She slipped away before anyone noticed her, her heart hammering as she returned to the library. Timmy was awake now, sketching a picture of their turtle hero on a notepad. He looked up as she entered, his face brightening. "Did you get lost?" He signed, a teasing glint in his eyes. Lily forced a smile. "Maybe a little. This place is huge." She sat beside him, her mind still reeling from what she'd overheard. Victor Hayes wasn't just a wealthy man with a dangerous edge. He was at the center of something dark, something that put Timmy in its crosshairs. She watched the boy draw his small hands steady, despite the chaos surrounding his life. "Timmy," she signed, "do you like living here?" His hands paused, his expression turning thoughtful. "It's okay," he signed, "but it's lonely. Everyone's nice, but they don't talk to me, not like you." Lily's throat tightened. She'd seen that loneliness before in her cousin Ben when kids at school ignored him, or teachers gave up trying to understand. She'd promised herself she'd never let anyone feel that way again, not if she could help it. Over the next few days, Lily settled into a strange routine. She spent mornings with Timmy in the library, teaching him new signs and weaving stories that made his eyes light up. They created a world where their turtle hero fought pirates and discovered hidden treasures, each session ending with Timmy giggling silently, his hands clapping in delight. But the mansion's tension never faded. Rose watched her like a hawk, her warnings about getting too close echoing in Lily's mind. The guards, led by a man named Marcus, with a scar across his knuckles, were polite, but distant, their eyes always scanning for threats. And Victor? Victor was a shadow appearing without warning, his presence silencing rooms. He watched her work with Timmy, his stormy eyes unreadable, but Lily caught glimpses of something softer when he looked at his son, a love so fierce it seemed to burn through his carefully controlled exterior. One evening, as Lily helped Timmy with a new sign for friend, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Victor standing in the library doorway, his suit jacket unbuttoned, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "You're good with him," he said, his voice low, almost reluctant. Lily blushed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "He's easy to teach. He's smart, curious. He just needs someone to listen." Victor's gaze sharpened, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Most people don't bother," he said. "They see him and think less." Lily's jaw tightened. "They're wrong. Timmy's not less. He's just different." Victor took a step closer, his presence filling the room. "You're not like most people, Lily Harper." Before she could respond, Timmy signed, "Dad, join our story." Victor hesitated, then set his glass down and sat at the table, his large hands moving with surprising grace as he signed, "What's the turtle doing now?" For the next hour, the three of them built a world together. Victor's usual intensity softened by Timmy's laughter. But that night, As Lily lay in her too-soft bed, the conversation she'd overheard haunted her. Diego Morales, routes, schedules, Timmy. Whoever this man was, he was a threat, and Timmy was caught in the middle. Lily stared at the ceiling, the mansion's silence pressing against her. She'd come here to help a boy who needed her. But now she was tangled in something far bigger, something that made her small life feel like a distant dream. She thought of Timmy's smile, the way he'd signed friend, like it was a treasure he'd never had before. She couldn't walk away, not now. But as she drifted into an uneasy sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that the world she'd stepped into was closing around her, and there was no way out. The Miami sun hung low over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. As Lily Harper sat on a weathered bench in Bayside Park, watching Timmy toss breadcrumbs to a flock of seagulls. The park, nestled along the edge of Biscayne Bay, was a slice of calm in the city's chaos, its palm trees swaying gently in the salty breeze. Timmy's laughter was silent but infectious, his small hands signing, "Look, they're dancing," as the birds swooped and squawked for scraps. Lily smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. For the first time since stepping into Victor Hayes's world, she felt like she was giving Timmy something normal, a chance to be a kid, to chase seagulls and feel the grass under his feet. But the illusion of peace was fragile, and Lily knew it. Marcus, Victor's lead bodyguard, stood 10 feet away, his scar-knuckled hands never straying far from the gun holstered beneath his jacket. 3 other guards fanned out around the park, their eyes scanning joggers, dog walkers, and the occasional tourist snapping photos of the bay. Lily had convinced Victor to let Timmy have this outing, arguing that a 9-year-old deserved to see something beyond the walls of a fortress. Victor had agreed reluctantly, his stormy eyes clouded with worry. 1 hour, he'd said, his voice firm. "Stay close to Marcus. No exceptions." Now, as Timmy signed more bread with a grin, Lily nodded, handing him another handful from the paper bag at her side. But her eyes kept drifting to the edges of the park, where the world felt too quiet, too still. She'd been at the Hayes estate for 2 weeks now, and the weight of Victor's world had settled into her bones. The mansion was a labyrinth of luxury and paranoia, its beauty marred by the constant hum of security cameras and the guarded whispers of staff who treated Timmy like a fragile relic rather than a child. Lily had thrown herself into teaching him, spending hours in the library crafting stories and teaching new signs: hope, dream, brave. Timmy soaked it up, his loneliness fading with every session, but the mansion's tension never eased. Rose, the housekeeper, watched her with a mix of suspicion and pity, her warnings about getting too close echoing in Lily's mind. Victor was a constant presence, his rare smiles reserved for Timmy, but his gaze lingering on Lily longer than she wanted to admit. She'd overheard more fragments of conversations, names like Diego Morales, mentions of the docks and territory, and each one tightened the knot in her stomach. Victor was a man at war, and Timmy was caught in the crossfire. Lily had promised herself she'd stay for Timmy to give him the voice he'd been denied, but she hadn't expected to feel so trapped, so watched. Now in the park, she tried to focus on Timmy's joy, but her instincts were screaming. A jogger in a black hoodie passed their bench for the second time, his pace too slow, his eyes hidden behind sunglasses despite the setting sun. Across the path, a man in a maintenance uniform lingered near a trash can, his toolbox untouched for longer than it should have been. Lily's pulse quickened. She glanced at Marcus, who was scanning the crowd, his jaw tight. "Something's wrong," she thought, her hand tightening on the bench. Before she could signal Marcus, Timmy signed, "Look, a boat," pointing toward the bay where a small yacht bobbed on the water. Lily forced a smile, but her eyes caught movement. A woman pushing a stroller circling back toward them, her posture too stiff for a casual walk. "Lily, stay calm," she told herself, but the air felt electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. The world exploded into chaos. The jogger pulled a gun from his waistband, firing 2 sharp shots that cracked through the air like thunder. Marcus dove to the ground, drawing his own weapon, but a bullet grazed his arm, blood blooming on his sleeve. The maintenance man and the woman with the stroller abandoned their props, producing automatic rifles from a toolbox and the stroller's undercarriage. A black van screeched to a stop across the street, its doors flying open as 5 masked men spilled out their tactical gear, glinting in the fading light. "Get down!" Marcus roared. But Lily was already moving. Timmy stood frozen by the water's edge, his face pale, his hands signing, "What's happening?" in a frantic loop. Lily sprinted across the grass, her heart pounding as bullets tore through the air, splintering the bench where she'd been sitting moments before. She tackled Timmy behind a palm tree, shielding him with her body, as the gunfire grew deafening. "It's okay, Timmy," she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her, her arms tight around his trembling frame. His small hands clung to her, signing, "Scared, scared," against her chest. Marcus and his men fought back their shots precise, despite being outnumbered. Lily saw one guard take a bullet to the leg, collapsing behind a park bench. But he kept firing, his face grim. The attackers moved with purpose, their focus on Timmy, and Lily's blood ran cold as she realized this was no random assault. Diego Morales, she thought the name from Victor's hushed conversations burning in her mind. She pressed Timmy closer, scanning for an escape. The palm tree offered little cover, and the attackers were closing in, their shouts rising over the gunfire. "Grab the kid," one of them yelled, his voice muffled by a mask. Lily's eyes darted to the bay where the yacht was now moving closer to shore. She had to get Timmy out. But how? She signed, "Stay low, follow me," and pulled him toward a cluster of bushes, hoping to buy time. But as they crawled through the grass, a sharp pain tore through her side, a bullet grazing her ribs, the heat of it stealing her breath. She gasped, pressing a hand to her side, blood seeping through her fingers, but she didn't stop. Timmy's terrified eyes locked on hers, and she forced herself to keep moving, dragging him behind a low stone wall. The gunfire slowed, but the danger was far from over. 2 masked men flanked their position, their boots crunching on the gravel path. Lily's vision blurred from pain, but she signed, "Stay quiet, Timmy. I've got you." He nodded, his small body shaking, but his trust in her was unshakable. She scanned the park, her mind racing for a plan. The yacht was closer now, its engine humming, and she realized it was part of the attack, a getaway vehicle. If they took Timmy to the water, she'd never see him again. She had to act. Using the last of her strength, she grabbed a rock from the ground and hurled it toward a nearby trash can, the clang echoing through the park. The distraction worked. One of the men turned his gun, swinging away, and Lily seized the moment. She pulled Timmy to his feet, running toward the parking lot, where Marcus was still firing, holding off the attackers. But they weren't fast enough. A masked man cut them off his rifle, raised, and before Lily could react, he fired. The bullet grazed her shoulder, spinning her around, and in that moment of chaos, another man grabbed Timmy, yanking him toward the van. "No!" Lily screamed, lunging forward, despite the pain, her hands reaching for Timmy's. He signed, "Help me," as they dragged him away, his small face contorted with fear. Lily stumbled, her vision graying, and collapsed onto the grass, her blood staining the ground as the van's tires screeched, carrying Timmy away. She woke in a hospital room, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging her nose, Her side and shoulder throbbed beneath tight bandages, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. Victor Hayes sat beside her bed, his face haggard, his usually pristine suit rumpled and stained with what looked like blood. His stormy eyes burned with a fury that made her shrink back against the pillows. "They took him," she whispered, her voice raw, the words cutting like glass. "I tried to stop them. Victor, I swear." He held up a hand, silencing her, his fingers trembling with barely contained rage. "You threw yourself in front of a bullet for my son," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "You ran into a firefight to protect him. Don't apologize." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but it wasn't enough. They took him. Victor leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of his chair like he was anchoring himself to the world. "Diego Morales is a dead man," he said, his voice a deadly whisper. "I'll tear this city apart to find my son." Through the hospital window, Lily could see smoke rising from the skyline, a sign that Victor's war had already begun. But all she could think about was Timmy alone, and scared his small hands signing for help no one could hear. Lily was discharged the next morning against medical advice, her bandages pulling tight with every movement. Victor had moved her to a safe house in Coral Gables, a nondescript condo surrounded by armed guards who watched her like she was both a treasure and a liability. "Stay here," Victor had told her, his voice brooking no argument. "You're hurt. Let me handle this." But Lily couldn't sit still, couldn't wait while Timmy was out there trapped in the hands of a man who saw him as a bargaining chip. She remembered the signs Timmy had taught her during their library sessions, secret gestures he and Victor used, old variations of American Sign Language passed down from Victor's grandfather, a deaf fisherman who'd worked the Florida Keys. "If you're ever in trouble," Timmy had signed, giggling, use the old signs. "They're our code." Lily had laughed, then, charmed by the bond between father and son. Now those signs were her only hope of finding him. She waited until nightfall when the guards were distracted by a change in shifts. "I need some air," she told Marcus, who stood outside her door, his arm in a sling from the park, shooting. He nodded, his face etched with exhaustion. 5 minutes on the balcony. Lily stepped outside, her eyes scanning the fire escape zigzagging down the building. The guards watched the entrances, but they'd overlooked this. She climbed down, wincing as her wounds protested, and hit the street, hailing a taxi with shaking hands. The docks, she told the driver, a grizzled man who raised an eyebrow at her hospital bracelet, but said nothing when she slipped him an extra 20. During the ride, she replayed every conversation with Timmy, searching for clues. He loved water boats, harbors, the stories they'd made about their turtle hero sailing to freedom. If he was scared, he'd gravitate towards something familiar, something that felt like escape. The Miami docks stretched for miles, but Lily started with the warehouses closest to the water, where a boy might imagine boats waiting to carry him home. The fourth warehouse she checked was the one. It looked abandoned, its windows boarded up, but fresh tire tracks marred the dirt outside, and cigarette butts littered the ground unweathered by rain. Through a cracked window she saw a shadow move, small, childlike. Her heart leaped. Timmy was alive. She found a rusted loading dock with a broken window just wide enough to slip through. The glass cut her palms as she climbed inside, but she bit back a gasp, moving silently through a maze of crates and machinery. The warehouse smelled of rust and salt, its air heavy with the weight of danger. She followed the sound of voices to a back room where 3 men stood their attention on a phone call. "Morales wants the kid delivered by midnight," one said, his voice rough. "If Hayes doesn't pay, we start sending pieces." Lily's blood froze, but she forced herself to focus. Timmy sat against the wall, his wrists bound with zip ties, his dark eyes scanning the room for an escape. He was thinking, planning, just like Victor had taught him. Lily positioned herself behind a stack of crates where Timmy could see her through a narrow gap. She waited until the men were distracted, then signed in the old gestures Timmy had taught her. Little Sailor, she signed, using Victor's nickname for him. "I'm here." Timmy's eyes widened, but he didn't flinch, his small hands signing back carefully. 3 men, 2 guns. One has car keys. Lily's heart swelled with pride. He was scared but sharp, just like his father. "Can you move quietly?" she signed. He nodded, but his hands grew urgent. "Man with scar coming back soon. Outside." Lily's stomach dropped. A 4th man, one she hadn't seen. She signed, "When I move, run to the water, hide. Your dad will find you." Timmy's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. Lily knew the odds were against them, 1 wounded woman against 4 armed men, but she couldn't leave him. Not now, not ever. She was about to create a distraction when Timmy's hands flashed a warning, "Behind you!" Lily spun around, her heart stopping, as she came face to face with a man whose scarred face she recognized from Victor's security briefings, Diego Morales. His gun pointed at her head, a cold smile spreading across his lips. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "Looks like Victor Hayes's little librarian thought she could play hero." The morning sun bathed the Hayes estate in a golden glow, its rays filtering through the palm trees and dancing across the manicured gardens where Timmy ran his small hands waving as he chased a butterfly. From the library's window seat, Lily Harper watched him, her bandaged ribs aching with every breath, but her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The events at the warehouse 3 days ago felt like a fever dream, gunfire, blood, and Diego Morales's cold smile as he held a gun to her head. But Timmy was safe now, his laughter silent but vibrant as he darted through the grass. A boy transformed by the knowledge that he was worth fighting for. Lily's wounds, a grazing bullet to her side and a bruised shoulder from falling debris, were a small price to pay for seeing him like this. The mansion, once a fortress of cold opulence, felt different today, warmer, almost alive, as if Timmy's joy had breathed life into its marble halls. Victor Hayes stood in the doorway, his usual tailored suit replaced by a simple black shirt and jeans, his stormy eyes softer than Lily had ever seen. "He's never done that before," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. Lily turned, her hands resting on the window seat's cushions. "Done what?" Victor nodded toward Timmy, who was now signing Butterfly to a young guard named Javier, who fumbled through a clumsy response. "Tried to teach someone else to sign," Victor said. "For 9 years it was just us, our secret language. Now he wants to share it with everyone." Lily's throat tightened, her eyes following Timmy as he patiently corrected Javier's hand movements. The guards, once distant and wary, were starting to soften around the boy, their fear giving way to curiosity. She'd spent the last 3 days recovering in the mansion under Victor's strict orders to rest, but she hadn't been idle. In the quiet hours, while Timmy napped or played, she'd organized a small workshop for the staff, teaching them basic signs. "Hello, thank you, friend." It was a start, a way to break down the invisible wall that had kept Timmy isolated for so long. Rose, the housekeeper, had been skeptical at first, her lips pursed as she sat in the back of the library during the first session. But even she had joined in by the end, her stern face softening as she signed "Good morning" to Timmy, earning a beaming smile in return. The change was subtle, but profound, like a crack in the mansion's icy facade letting warmth seep through. Lily had always believed in the power of small acts, reading to kids at the library, helping her cousin Ben navigate a world that didn't always see him. But here, In this dangerous world, those acts felt like defiance, like a rebellion against fear. Victor moved into the room, settling into a leather armchair across from her, his gaze steady but unguarded, in a way that made Lily's pulse quicken. "You've changed him," he said, his voice carrying a weight she wasn't used to hearing. "I've spent years trying to protect him, to keep him safe from my world, but I couldn't give him what he needed most." Lily tilted her head, curious. "What's that?" Victor leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped as if to steady himself. A voice he said simply, "I learned to sign the day he was born, practiced until my hands bled, but I could only give him words. You gave him something more, Lily. You made him feel seen, like he matters." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes, and she looked away, focusing on Timmy outside, now spinning in circles, with Javier, both of them laughing. "He's always mattered," she said softly. "He just needed someone to remind him." The memory of the warehouse flashed through her mind. Timmy's terrified eyes, the cold press of Diego's gun against her temple, the deafening chaos of Victor's men storming in. She'd acted on instinct, throwing herself between Timmy and danger, and it had nearly cost her life. But it had also shown her something she hadn't expected. Victor Hayes, the man who ruled Miami's shadows, wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a father who'd burned the world to protect his son. And in those frantic moments, as she'd shielded Timmy with her body, she'd realized she'd do the same. When had this boy become so important to her? When had his father's stormy eyes started to feel like home? Victor stood crossing to the window to watch Timmy, his silhouette framed by the golden light. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice steady but laced with something raw, something vulnerable. "And I need you to think carefully, because once I ask, there's no going back." Lily's heart began to race, her hands gripping the edge of the window seat. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor turned to face her, and for the first time she saw the man beneath the mask. Not the calculated kingpin, not the predator who'd gunned down Diego Morales without hesitation, but a father who'd nearly lost everything. "Stay," he said, the word simple but heavy with meaning. "Not as Timmy's teacher, not as someone under my protection. Stay as family. Our family." Lily's breath caught her mind, reeling. Victor took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I know what my world is, Lily. It's dark, dangerous, built on things I can't undo. I'm asking you to tie yourself to that, to us, me and Timmy. I'm asking you to be his mother, my wife, the heart of whatever we can build together." The words hung between them, fragile and terrifying, like a bridge she wasn't sure she could cross. Outside, Timmy had stopped chasing butterflies and was watching them through the window, his dark eyes bright with hope. Lily stood her legs unsteady and moved toward Victor, stopping just inches from him. She could smell his cologne, sharp and warm, and see the faint scar along his jaw, a reminder of the life he led. "Victor, I'm just a librarian," she said, her voice trembling. "I live in a one-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet. I eat cereal for dinner half the time. Your world, it's not mine." Victor's expression didn't waver, but his hand reached out, brushing her cheek with a gentleness that made her heart stutter. "Your world is the one Timmy needs," he said, "and if I'm honest, it's the one I need too." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she looked out at Timmy, who was signing family with a grin, as if he'd known what his father was asking. "Yes," she whispered the word, feeling like a leap into the unknown. Victor's face transformed, relief and joy flooding his features, and he pulled her into his arms, his touch careful around her bandages. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Because once you're ours, Lily, I'll never let you go." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't want you to." The library door burst open, and Timmy barreled in his hands, signing so fast Lily could barely keep up. "Are you staying? Are we a family?" He signed, his face radiant. Lily knelt to his level, her hands steady as she signed back. "If that's what you want, sweetheart." Timmy's response was instant, his small hands forming Mom as he looked at her, then Dad as he turned to Victor. His smile was brighter than the Miami sun, and he launched himself into their arms, pulling them together in a hug that felt like the first real moment of peace Lily had known in weeks. Victor's composure cracked his arms, wrapping around them both, his eyes shining with something Lily hadn't seen before. Hope. Later that afternoon, Lily gathered the staff in the library for another signing lesson. This time more showed up: guards, maids, even the cook, who'd been too shy to join before. Lily taught them happy, safe love-watching, as Timmy moved among them, correcting their clumsy attempts with patient enthusiasm. Rose lingered at the back, her usual sternness softened as she signed, "Thank you," to Timmy, earning a hug that made her freeze, then smile. Lily caught Victor watching from the doorway, his expression a mix of pride and awe. "You're changing this place," he said quietly, stepping beside her. "Not just Timmy. All of us." Lily shook her head, her voice soft. "I'm just listening to him, Victor. That's all it takes." He looked at her, his stormy eyes warm, and for a moment the weight of his world seemed to lift. That evening, Timmy insisted on showing Lily a story he'd created, a signed tale about a library hero who saved a boy from pirates by teaching him to talk with his hands. As he performed, his hands weaving a world of adventure and courage, Lily felt tears prick her eyes again. This was what she'd given him, not just signs, but a way to be heard, to be real. And in return, he'd given her something she hadn't realized she'd been missing: a purpose, a family, a place to belong. Victor joined them, his hands signing along with Timmy's, and when the story ended, he pulled Lily close, his voice a whisper. "You're our miracle, Lily Harper." As the sun set over Miami, casting the estate in shades of pink and gold, Lily stood with Victor and Timmy in the garden, their hands linked as they signed family together. The mansion, once a fortress of fear, felt like a home, its walls no longer closing in, but opening up to something new. The lesson was clear, woven into every moment of their story. Kindness, no matter how small, could change a life. Listening, truly, listening could break down walls stronger than any fortress. And courage wasn't about guns or power. It was about choosing to care even when the world was dark and dangerous. Lily had walked into Victor's world expecting to lose herself, but instead, she'd found a family, a purpose, and a love she never could have imagined. As Timmy signed, "I love you," to them both, his face glowing under the fading light, Lily knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.